realignment for just a moment. There's a pretty big deadline that Doug and I chatted about coming up this week. February 1st is the deadline for the ACC and ESPN to renew their agreement. We haven't heard anything on that just yet, but we are getting incredibly close to that deadline. We don't have to go so far into that, but I do want to ask you, we have talked a lot about where we would rather land, where you'd rather end up from a conference perspective when Florida State eventually gets out, hopefully sooner rather than later. So we don't have to go so far into like, oh, when's that going to happen? When's this, that, the other. But I do want to ask you, what was your original thought? When we talked about this a year ago, were you a Big Ten guy? Were you an SEC guy?
I was a Big Ten guy, and I still am. I think the SEC makes more sense for fans, but I think it makes more sense for fans 20 years ago when air travel wasn't as easy as it is right now. A lot of these Big Ten schools, if you want to go to the games, you can get flights for $200 or less if you do it the right way. Don't wait till the last minute. I
Like I
think,
do.
yeah, I think going to the Big Ten, it accelerates our path to being an AAU university, which is a huge deal academically and from a research standpoint. And I think we would get that accreditation very quickly. And I just love the idea of going to Chicago, Indianapolis, going to the Big House, going to Columbus. I would prefer FSU in the Big Ten because I can go to an SEC game anytime I want if I really wanted to do that.
Yeah. So the big thing that always kind of intrigued me about the SEC was, like you just talked about, travel. It is closer travel. Like going to Athens, I'm probably just flying to Atlanta for
Yeah,
it's an hour flight and then you're right there. So and then same thing with a lot of places, right? Like to get to Tuscaloosa, you're just flying into Birmingham. It's super easy. I agree with you though. Like it's not that hard to fly to Chicago. It's not that hard to fly to Columbus. Like I just actually looked up while you were talking. I can get a round trip flight to Columbus in September for like $200. Like
exactly.
pretty easy. Not super. Now there are some that are more difficult. Like Lansing's not the easiest place to get. There are some that are a little bit more difficult. I do think I would enjoy the matchups of the SEC a little bit more.
Yeah.
Still,
That.
I'll say that. Like I think that the matchups in the Big Ten that would really excite me would be all the powers, right? The Ohio States, Michigan's, Penn States. Michigan State would kind of be cool. USC, obviously. Oregon, obviously. Washington doesn't do much for me. USC doesn't. UCLA.
So I would love a trip to Washington to do some cell gating.
Yeah. So just more so, but like the game itself. Like once you do that once, like so I don't know.
Fair.
There are
Yeah.
less of those in the Big Ten to me. Whereas like I'd love to go to Williams-Brice in South Carolina. I'd love to go to Vandy in Nashville. I'd love to go to Arkansas. I'd love to go to Texas and Oklahoma. Like to me, some of those would be more fun. And then we didn't even mention obviously going to Baton Rouge, Tuscaloosa, Athens. We go to Gainesville often. All of those to me, not that I think the Gainesville game would go away, but I do think there are more fun matchups, but I'm leaning Big Ten now. Like I was when we argued like a year ago or whatever on SEC Big Ten, I think I'm leaning more towards Big Ten now for a couple of reasons. One, I think the Big Ten is the more top heavy conference that if like a Florida State and Clemson or a Florida State and Miami, as much as we hate them, let's be real, their investment into football is very high right now. I do think they're going to consistently win 9+ games. I think they could continue to do that in the Big Ten against kind of like some of the bottom feeders in that conference. And so I'm leaning towards the Big Ten. Also, it's just more money. It's not only do they have the last two national champions, not only do they have the best programs in college football right now, and the SEC, though it's still a good conference, seems to be trending down a bit. I think the idea of the Big Ten adding more powers could solidify them as the best conference. Like I think the SEC, if we're being honest, still has more good to like average teams, and the Big Ten just has more elite teams. What if the Big Ten was able to get like the foursome of Miami, Clemson, Notre Dame, and FSU? Like it would, and I'm not trying to give Miami so much love on here or anything like that, but like let's be real. Like if they continue their investment, like football's all about money right now. If they continue their investment, they're going to be good. The Big Ten with Miami, Clemson, Notre Dame, and FSU, and I don't think Notre Dame's close to joining a conference or anything like that. That would be insane. And it would be so much better than what the SEC has right now. So that kind of intrigues me. Also, just not having the SEC mentality as part of what we do would be pretty great. So I think there are some pros to staying down here in the Southeast, but there are a lot more pros for going Big Ten.
Yeah, I'd be happy with either one. And Florida State already has a strong NIL program in the ACC, which is the worst of the Power Four conferences left right now, which I don't think it's debatable. Um, but the Big Ten is showing us, and granted, it is Ohio State, it is Brian Hartline, and Brian Hartline will not be at Ohio State forever. But look at what Jeremiah Smith did in the national title game last week. On that third and long when Notre Dame thought they still had a chance to win the game, and he just comes up with a massive play. He came out of South Florida, and NIL played a role, I'm sure, but the stigma of the best players always go to the SEC is kind of gone at this point. Yes, the SEC is always going to have the most players drafted in the NFL draft just because of geographical location. That will not change, but recruiting will not be hurt one iota by going to the Big Ten. And I just think, to your point, TJ, more money. That Florida State can use every penny they can get. By no means are we poor like some of our rivals try to troll us and say we are, but every penny matters when you're a state-funded public school, and that's what Florida State is. And especially what a lot of people forget all the time, we are a very young university. We didn't start playing football until the 1950s. A lot of these schools in the SEC started playing in the 1800s or early 1900s, and they have generations of wealth. Florida State does not have that right now. They will eventually, but to even the playing field for now, I just think the Big Ten's the better option. I've thought that since the beginning of this conversation started like 18 months ago or whenever it was, and I continue to believe that.
Yeah, I saw an interesting comment here just about how it's maybe a little easier to drive to games in the SEC than it is the Big Ten. So Florida removed. I don't know how many SEC games are you truly driving to? Most of them
Georgia, that's
are
it.
yeah, most of them are a little bit outside of what I'm comfortable driving to.
Yeah,
Right? Like Clemson is like 9 hours, but for Clemson I flew, or no, I'm sorry, I did drive to Clemson. No, I flew to Clemson. Yeah, I didn't drive to Clemson. I flew to Atlanta and drove over. Um, SEC, like Baton Rouge is a little far of a drive, like I'd fly into New Orleans because it's like $100. Nashville, again, you can fly for like $150 on Southwest,
yeah.
which again, time versus money. Like I just don't want to drive for 10 hours to any of these places. So they are more drivable, I think, than the Big Ten. Now, if you live in Atlanta or you live in Tallahassee, maybe that makes it a little easier. From where I am, the SEC games are not that much more convenient
No,
to get to. And most of them, because they're in small college towns, you do have to fly into somewhere and then rent a car and drive. Or if you just drive the like I went to Tuscaloosa this year, there was no chance I was driving that. Like I flew into Nashville and drove down, right? And so, and Birmingham's a little easier, but I went last minute. So the flights were insane. But again, I don't know that the travel is that much easier. Now, again, if you live in Atlanta, maybe it's a little easier to drive to some of these places. But like, you ain't driving to Austin. You're flying to Austin, right? You're flying to probably Oklahoma City and driving down to Norman, right? And so, I don't know that the SEC is that much different from a travel perspective. Again, based on where you live. You live in Nashville, you can kind of get everywhere quickly. Here in Tampa, where Richie is in Orlando, travel is just not too much different. Like, and we have a lot of people that listen in South Florida. If you're in South Florida, you're not driving to any SEC games except for the one in Gainesville, which that one's going to remain whether you go to the Big Ten or the SEC. So I do think that's a good comment, just bringing up travel. I just don't see the travel as too big. A flight to Columbus and a flight to wherever we're at, like that is another 30 minutes.
and you're not going to the Minnesota game. You're not going to
Right. You're flying into places that are easier. Yeah.
yeah. And
Um,
I guess I'm going to Northwestern just because Chicago is an amazing city to visit. Not a great place to live, but I've loved every minute I've been there. But yeah, the places that you want to go are easy to get to.
yeah.
That's that's the easiest way to say it.
Jonathan, where are you driving from? Because I see you said, Georgia, South Carolina, Vandy, Alabama, Auburn, all within driving distance. From Tallahassee, I would agree with that. From where
Yeah.
we are, kind of Central Florida or Southern Florida, like that would be those would. I
Yeah.
don't know how drive. Again, 9 hours in a car versus an hour and a half in a plane. I'm taking that plane trip all day. Like
Especially for, yeah,
dude. I'm
especially
telling you, there's
when you
nothing worse,
consider,
Richie, than driving home for 9 hours after a loss. I just want to
I
get
know.
on that plane and go.
How about a 9-hour flight after a loss? That was fun.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, don't remind me. I did have a good time in Dublin. I will say, I had a good time in
I
Dublin.
did too. Yeah.